My name is Emma Collins. I'm 33 years old, and I was standing at the airport with my carry-on in one hand and my boarding pass in the other when my phone buzzed. The text was from my dad. Pay it all back and stay home. This trip is for real family only. We gave your ticket away. I read it 3 times because my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. I had paid for the flights. I had paid for the Caribbean cruise. I had paid for the excursions, the upgraded cabins, the dinners, the entire celebration. And 6 months earlier, I had bought them an $888,000 house because they were drowning in debt and swore they just needed one clean start. But in one message, my place in the family became clear. I wasn't a daughter. I was a wallet with a name. They thought the worst thing they had done was leave me behind. They had no idea what was hidden beneath the floorboards of the house I owned. Before I tell you what I did next, tell me this. Where are you watching from right now? And what would you have done if your own family sent you that message at the airport? I didn't cry in the terminal. That surprised me. I stared at the departure screen, watching my flight to Miami flashboarding, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not sadness, not even anger. Just clarity. I stepped out of the boarding line and called my dad. He answered as though he'd been waiting for me to beg. "Emma, don't make this dramatic," he said before I could speak. "Your brother needed your cabin. Madison's friend came along at the last minute, and it's awkward to have you around after everything." After everything. That was how he described the last 6 months of me saving them from foreclosure, collection calls, and the kind of financial humiliation they used to whisper about behind closed doors. I asked him to repeat what he meant by real family. There was a pause. Then my brother grabbed the phone. "You always do this," Ryan snapped. "You act like money makes you important. You investigate boat fires and fake storm claims for a living, Emma. You're not some business genius." That was my job. Apparently, not real. I was a forensic marine insurance investigator in Charleston, the person people called when a marina burned, a yacht sank under suspicious circumstances, or a shipyard claimed hurricane damage that didn't match the wind data. My work was technical, ugly, and profitable. Ryan called it chasing broken boats with a clipboard. Meanwhile, he was preparing what he described as a major coastal hospitality venture, which really meant he'd printed a pitch deck, borrowed money from 3 cousins, and spent most of it on logo designs and imported espresso machines. My mother's voice came next, soft and poisonous. "Honey, your brother is building something with a future. You should support him instead of making everyone feel guilty." I looked down at my ticket. Then I opened the cruise app on my phone. Every reservation was under my payment profile. The base tickets had already been issued. But everything that made the trip luxurious, the premium dining, balcony upgrades, drink packages, spa credits, private island cabanas, snorkeling excursion, airport transfers, and even the onboard spending account, was billed to me. I asked one final question. "So you want me to pay for everything and stay home?" My dad answered without hesitation. "Exactly. Be mature for once." "Okay," I said. Then I hung up. I walked to a quiet corner near a closed coffee kiosk and started making calls. I had booked the cruise through a concierge travel service I regularly used for client inspections along the coast. The agent sounded shocked when I asked her to remove my payment authorization from every optional charge and cancel every refundable package tied to my account. "Are you sure?" she asked. "They're already in transit." "I'm sure." She processed the cab and downgrade requests wherever possible, reversed the excursion charges, canceled the dining package, and froze the onboard spending account. I didn't touch anything that was legally non-refundable. I didn't need to. I simply stopped funding the fantasy. 10 minutes later, my phone exploded. My brother. "What did you do?" My mother. "Emma, this is embarrassing." My dad. Call me now. Madison, whose number I barely recognized. You ruined everything because you're jealous. I opened the family group chat. For years, it had been the place where I sent money, repair updates, loan documents, and cheerful little lies like, "Don't worry, I handled it." This time, I typed 6 words. "Have a nice trip without me." Then I silenced my phone. I didn't fly to Miami. Instead, I rented a car and drove south toward the house. The beautiful marshfront home near Savannah where they'd been living rent-free while telling everyone it was their reward for surviving hard times. They had forgotten one important detail. I hadn't bought that house for them. My LLC had bought it, and they had signed a lease. A very generous lease, but a lease nonetheless. As the highway stretched ahead of me, I kept hearing my dad's words. Real family. Real family didn't erase you the moment your money cleared. Real family didn't take your seat at the table and hand it to a stranger. By the time I crossed into Georgia, I wasn't asking why they had done it anymore. I was asking myself how much of my life they had already stolen before I finally noticed. The house sat at the end of a quiet road lined with live oaks and tidal grass, the kind of place my mother used to call healing whenever she posted sunset photos from the porch. I parked across the street and immediately spotted the moving truck backed into the driveway. 2 movers were carrying a black leather sectional through the front door. Another was unloading boxes labeled Ryan Office. Madison stood on the porch in oversized sunglasses, pointing around as though she owned every brick. The moment she saw me, she froze. For a split second, the smile vanished from her face. Then it returned. "Emma, aren't you supposed to be at home?" I walked up the driveway and asked why movers were bringing my brother's belongings into my property. She lifted her chin, reached into her tote bag, and pulled out a folder. "Your dad signed the transfer before they left," she said. "Ryan is taking over the house for the business. Your parents said you agreed." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I needed a second to breathe. The paper Madison handed me had my dad's signature at the bottom and a title across the top: Residential Ownership Reassignment Agreement. It looked like something Ryan had downloaded from a free legal template website and edited at midnight. My father had no ownership interest. My brother had no legal claim. Madison had no idea she was waving a counterfeit key at the actual lock. I told the movers to stop. One of them said they had been paid for a full unload. I replied, "Then call whoever paid you." Madison stepped closer. "You don't get to punish everyone because you're single and bitter." There it was, the family script. If I said no, I was bitter. If I asked for respect, I was dramatic. If I protected myself, I was selfish. I pulled up the deed records on my phone, then the LLC operating documents, and finally the lease agreement bearing my parents' signatures. "This house is owned by Collins Marine Holdings, LLC, I said. "I am the managing member. Your paper is worthless." Madison's smile tightened. "Ryan said you only put it in the LLC for tax reasons." "Ryan says a lot of things." She called the police. I didn't. While we waited, my younger sister arrived in a rideshare, dragging a suitcase behind her. Her face was red from stress. Paige had always floated between sides. Never cruel enough to lead the attack. Never brave enough to stop it. She lowered her voice. "Emma, can we please not do this in front of strangers?" I asked if she knew they had given away my cruise ticket. She looked down. That answered me. "They said you'd overreact," she murmured. The officers arrived 20 minutes later. Madison rushed toward them, waving the fake transfer agreement as though it were a royal decree. I waited until she finished, then handed them the real deed, the lease, my ID, and the LLC registration. One officer read everything in silence. The other looked at Madison. "Ma'am, Do you have any document signed by the property owner? She pointed to my dad's signature. The officer shook his head. This person is not listed as the owner. The movers shifted uncomfortably. Madison's confidence began to crack. She called Ryan on speakerphone. I could hear music and the sounds of a ship in the background. He shouted, "Tell them Dad authorized it." The officer repeated calmly, "Your father cannot authorize the transfer of property he does not own." Ryan cursed. Paige flinched. Madison made one last attempt. "But their family lives here." I answered, "They lived here under a lease. That lease is now under review." The words came out calmly, but something inside me had shifted permanently. The officers informed Madison that the movers had to remove everything they had already brought inside unless I gave permission for it to stay. I didn't. The sectional came back out. The boxes came back out. Ryan's fake executive desk came back out, still wrapped in plastic like a prop from a failed play. Madison stood in the driveway shaking, not with fear, but with humiliation. Paige followed me onto the porch. "Emma, please," she said. "Ryan was counting on this house. He told investors he had a headquarters here." I turned toward her. "Then he lied to his investors." She swallowed. "Maybe, but he's family." I looked through the front windows at the rooms I had furnished, repaired, insured, and paid taxes on. "No, Paige," I said. "He's someone who keeps using that word after every theft." That evening, after the police left and the moving truck pulled away, I changed the smart lock codes, photographed every room, and walked through the master bedroom to inspect a section of flooring that looked slightly newer than the rest. I didn't open it. I simply stood over it, feeling as though the house itself was holding its breath. I called Nathan Caldwell the next morning. Nathan wasn't a dramatic lawyer. He was the kind who listened without interrupting, requested documents in neatly numbered folders, and used silence like a weapon. I sent him the fake transfer agreement, the lease, the deed, the police incident number, and screenshots of the family group chat. He called back 11 minutes later. "Emma," he said, "your family is either reckless or very confident you won't fight back. Both are dangerous." He advised me to terminate their lease properly, document abandonment while they were away, and secure the property against unauthorized entry. Then he asked the question I had been avoiding. "Do you want to keep the house?" I looked out across the marsh. 6 months earlier, I believed buying that house would end the chaos. My parents had been living in a cramped rental after my dad's contracting business collapsed. My mother cried over medical bills and maxed out credit cards. Ryan insisted he couldn't focus on building his company while the family was unstable, so I stepped in. I had spent years climbing out of poverty, believing that maybe generosity could rewrite our history. But the house hadn't healed anything. It had only given them a nicer stage on which to disrespect me. "No," I said. "Sell it." Nathan already knew a cash buyer. Grant Mercer, a developer who restored coastal properties into small luxury retreats. Grant had tried to buy the house before my LLC closed on it. I had outbid him because I believed my family needed a safe place more than I needed another investment. Nathan called him. By lunchtime, Grant offered $1.03 million in cash, with a 7-day closing, no financing contingency, and the property delivered vacant. I accepted. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted freedom, with paperwork. That afternoon, I returned with a licensed inspector, a locksmith, and a storage company. Since my parents were on a cruise and someone had already attempted to move into the property without authorization, Nathan instructed me to document every step. We photographed every room, cataloged valuables, and separated personal belongings from fixtures. In the master bedroom, the inspector stopped over the same section of flooring I had noticed. "This area was cut and reset," he said. He carefully lifted one edge. Beneath the floorboards was a shallow cavity wrapped in plastic. Inside sat a waterproof file box. My name was written across the lid in black marker. My hands went cold. Inside were old credit card statements, loan applications, photocopies of my social security card, a copy of my birth certificate, signatures that looked like mine, but weren't, and letters from banks dated 12 years earlier. There were business credit lines connected to Ryan's first failed venture, equipment financing tied to my dad, collection notices mailed to addresses where I had never lived. I remembered being 20 years old and getting denied for my first apartment because my credit had been destroyed. My parents told me identity theft happened all the time. They promised they would help me fix it. They took me to a local banker they knew, handed me forms to sign, and told me not to file a police report because it would only make everything worse. I believed them. I was young. I was scared. And I was desperate to be loved. Now I stood inside the $1 million house I had bought for the people who had apparently started stealing from me before I was even old enough to rent an apartment. Nathan came over himself after I sent him the photographs. He put on gloves before touching anything. "Do not confront them about this directly," he said. "We make copies. We preserve the originals. We report everything through the proper channels." I nodded, but my throat burned. The cruise messages kept coming. My mother complained that the dining package was gone. My dad demanded that I restore the onboard account. Ryan sent a voice memo calling me jealous of his future. I listened to 5 seconds of it and deleted it. Then I looked at the oldest loan application in the file box. My forged signature sat beneath a line that read, "Personal Guarantor." The date was 3 weeks after my 20th birthday. Suddenly the cruise wasn't the betrayal. The house wasn't the betrayal. They were only the latest receipts. The real theft had been happening for 12 years, and they had hidden the evidence beneath the bedroom where they slept. I spent the next 2 days in Nathan's office with the file box spread across a conference table. Every page felt like a ghost reaching out from my 20s. There was a credit card opened in my name to buy inventory for Ryan's first premium seafood subscription company. There was a line of credit my dad had used to cover payroll for a contracting job he had underbid. There was a personal loan supposedly signed by me to pay the deposit on a restaurant lease Ryan abandoned after 8 weeks. The amounts weren't small mistakes. They totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, shuffled through accounts, refinanced, disputed, and buried. My mother's handwriting appeared on sticky notes. Use Emma's address. Call before statement. Tell bank error. That one broke something inside me. My mother hadn't simply looked the other way. She had organized the silence. Nathan brought in a forensic document examiner he trusted. She compared the signatures from my legitimate records with those on the loan documents and immediately flagged multiple inconsistencies. We ordered my credit reports, filed identity theft affidavits, and prepared evidence packets for state investigators, banking regulators, and law enforcement. I learned that some of the debts had aged out. Some had been quietly settled, and others had damaged my life in ways I had blamed on myself for years. Every higher interest rate, every rejected rental application, every humiliating conversation with a lender during my early 20s, every one of them carried my family's fingerprints. While we worked, the sale moved quickly. Grant Mercer inspected the house, reviewed the police report, and confirmed he still wanted it delivered vacant. I hired a bonded moving company and a neutral inventory service. Nothing was thrown away. My parents' furniture, clothing, kitchenware, Ryan's ridiculous office furniture, and the boxes Madison had tried to move in were all packed, labeled, and delivered to an inexpensive storage unit in an industrial district outside Savannah. The first month's rent was prepaid. After that, it became their responsibility. Nathan sent formal notice by email, certified mail, and text message. Lease terminated for attempted unauthorized transfer, unlawful occupancy expansion, and breach of lease terms. Where legally permitted, mail forwarding was changed to the storage facility's business address, and every official communication went through Nathan's office. I didn't send emotional explanations. I sent documents. The family group chat turned into a storm. Paige asked whether I could slow everything down until everyone returned. I told her no. Madison posted a vague social media status about women who destroy families because nobody chooses them. Ryan uploaded a photo from the cruise deck with the caption, "Still winning." 3 hours later, he discovered the onboard spending account had been frozen and called me 17 times. My dad left a voicemail. "You're making yourself impossible to forgive." I played that message twice, not because it hurt, because it was almost funny. They had stolen my credit, my labor, my money, my dignity. And now they believed forgiveness belonged to them too. On the 5th day, I signed the closing documents in Nathan's office. Grant wired the money. After fees, taxes, and payoff adjustments, the profit was substantial enough to make my hands tremble. I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt quiet. Maybe freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like a printer quietly pushing out the final page of a property transfer. On the 7th day, the house no longer belonged to my LLC. It belonged to Grant Mercer. He planned to restore it as part of a small waterfront resort with 6 private cottages and a hurricane-resistant dock. He thanked me for the smooth closing. Smooth. That word stayed with me because nothing about my family had ever been smooth. I drove to the storage facility one last time and looked at the unit from outside. Their entire performance was locked inside. The porch furniture from my mother's sunset photos, my dad's tools, Ryan's fake headquarters, Madison's boxes labeled Executive Lounge. A life built on access to me sat behind a roll-up door. Paige called while I was sitting in my car. "Emma," she said, "Mom's crying. Dad says you've gone too far." I asked whether she had seen the documents. She fell silent. I told her, "When they get back, ask them what they did to my name when I was 20. She whispered, "What are you talking about?" "Ask them." Then I ended the call. They returned from the cruise on a gray Saturday morning. By noon, my phone looked like it had been thrown into a hornet's nest. The trip they had stolen from me had fallen apart in small, humiliating stages. Without my payment authorization, the upgraded dining disappeared first. Then the drink packages, then the private cabana, then the shore excursions. Ryan had promised Madison's friend a VIP experience. My dad apparently tried arguing with guest services by saying, "My daughter is the account holder," until someone asked whether the account holder was present. She wasn't. My mother tried using her own debit card for incidental charges. It was declined twice. By the time they reached the old house, they were sunburned, exhausted, and angry enough to forget caution. Grant was outside with contractors measuring the porch for repairs. My dad walked straight past the workers and entered his old door code. It failed. He tried again, pressing the keypad harder, as though anger could unlock property law. Ryan arrived in a rideshare behind them with Madison and Paige. The moment he saw the contractors, he started shouting that they were trespassing. Grant walked down the steps and calmly introduced himself as the owner. My dad laughed in his face. "This is our family home." Grant, carrying himself with the calm confidence of a man accustomed to expensive disputes, replied, "Not anymore." Ryan shoved the fake transfer agreement into his hands. "We have rights." Grant read the first page, handed it back, and said, "You have printer ink." That single sentence nearly caused a riot. My mother began crying loudly enough for neighbors to step onto their porches. Madison held up her phone and started recording. This is elder abuse. This is financial abuse. This is what happens when a bitter daughter gets power. Paige stood behind them, pale and confused, watching the situation stop looking like a misunderstanding and start looking exactly like what it was: a scam collapsing in public. Grant called the police before anyone laid a hand on him. When the officers arrived, my dad tried to play the wounded patriarch. He claimed I had bought the house as a gift. He claimed I had always been unstable. He claimed I was punishing them because I hadn't been included in a vacation. The officer asked him for proof of ownership. He had none. Ryan pushed the fake reassignment agreement forward once again. The officer recognized the address from the earlier moving incident. Isn't this the same document that was rejected last week? Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. Grant produced the recorded deed from the completed sale. The officer reviewed it and explained that the property legally belonged to Grant Mercer and that my family had no right to enter. My mother wailed. "Where are we supposed to go?" Grant said nothing. He didn't have to. Their belongings weren't inside anymore. The house was empty. That was when Ryan started to panic. "Emma can't do this," he said. "That house was part of my investor presentation. I had commitments." My dad hissed, "Shut up." But Ryan was unraveling. "You told me it was safe. You said she'd never actually check the LLC. You said the documents would be enough if we moved fast." The officer looked up. Paige looked at my dad. Madison stopped recording. My mother grabbed Ryan's arm, but he shook her off. "No. I'm done being blamed. Dad signed it. Mom knew. Everyone knew Emma would fold if we made it emotional." For the first time in my life, my family's private language was being spoken in front of people who weren't conditioned to excuse it. The neighbors heard. The officers heard. Grant heard. Paige heard every word. She whispered, "What documents?" My dad snapped, "Don't start." But she did. She turned to Ryan. "What did Emma mean about her name when she was 20? The entire driveway fell silent. My mother's sobbing stopped as if someone had cut a wire. Ryan's expression changed. Not guilty. Caught. He glanced toward the street as though he were calculating whether he could run from a question. That was when I arrived. I hadn't planned to come until Nathan called and told me the police were back at the property. I stepped out of my car with a folder in one hand and no desire left to be gentle. My father saw me and pointed as though I were the criminal. "You did this." "No," I said. "I finally stopped paying for what you did." The second police visit became the moment my family lost control of the story. I didn't scream. I didn't insult them. I handed the officer my ID, Nathan's business card, the incident file number, and a summary packet containing the identity theft evidence. I explained that a full report had already been prepared and that the original documents were secured with my attorney. My dad tried to interrupt 3 times. Each time, the officer told him to wait. Ryan was sweating through his crew's shirt. Madison quietly stepped away from him. Paige moved closer to me, not quite on my side yet, but no longer safely on theirs. When the officer asked Ryan whether he had any knowledge of documents created using my identity, he laughed far too loudly. "This is just old family stuff." That answer did more damage than silence ever could. Old family stuff isn't how innocent people describe forged loan applications. My dad muttered, "It was handled." My mother whispered, "We were desperate." There it was. Not a denial. Not shock. Desperation. Their favorite disguise. Ryan suddenly turned on them. "You said it wouldn't matter. You said her credit was already bad." My knees almost gave way. But I stayed standing. All those years, they had convinced me my ruined credit was the work of some faceless thief. They had comforted me for a wound they had created. Paige began crying, quietly at first, then uncontrollably. You used her? She asked. My mother answered, We needed to keep the family together. I looked directly at her. You kept the family together by cutting me into pieces. The officers separated us after that. No one was dramatically arrested in the driveway that day. Real consequences don't always arrive in handcuffs. Sometimes they arrive through reports, subpoenas, frozen accounts, civil lawsuits, insurance notifications, bank investigations, and lawyers who have no interest in family excuses. Over the next several months, that was exactly what happened. Nathan filed the civil case. The identity theft evidence was submitted to the proper agencies. The credit bureaus received formal disputes backed by documentation. Banks opened internal investigations. My dad's old contracting contacts stopped returning his calls. My mother's church friends, the same women who had admired her beautiful new house, learned that the house was gone. And why? Ryan's investors disappeared first. Then they demanded records. Then they threatened legal action of their own, after discovering that the company headquarters had never belonged to him. Madison left him before the month was over. She sent me one message saying she hadn't known the whole truth. I never replied. Paige was the only one who came to me without demanding comfort. She admitted she had known about the cruise ticket and had stayed silent because she believed I would forgive everyone, just as I always had. I told her forgiveness had become my family's favorite tool for keeping me available for the next betrayal. She asked whether we could rebuild our relationship someday. I gave her the only honest answer I had. Maybe you can rebuild yourself, but not through me. My parents and Ryan ended up in a cheap 2-bedroom apartment off a frontage road. The kind of place my mother once described as housing for temporary people, believing no one struggling financially could hear her. Their furniture remained in storage until they could no longer afford the payments. Some of it was auctioned. Some of it quietly disappeared into other people's homes. My dad blamed me publicly, until the legal letters forced him into silence. My mother mailed greeting cards filled with Bible verses. Not one contained an apology. Ryan sent a single email accusing me of destroying his future. I printed it for Nathan, then I blocked him. As for me, I invested part of the profit from the house sale into Grant Mercer's waterfront restoration project, not as charity, not as a daughter still trying to earn love, but as an investor, with contracts, boundaries, and my name protected on every page. The first cottage opened the following spring. From the dock, I could watch the marsh grass sway with the tide, steady and undisturbed. I stood there on opening day and realized I no longer felt guilty for surviving them. That was the lesson they never wanted me to learn. Family can be real and still be unsafe. Love without respect is nothing more than control wearing a gentler face. And the moment someone decides your only value is what you can provide, you have every right to take back your keys, your money, your name, and your future. My dad told me to pay it all back and stay home. So I did pay something back. I paid back 12 years of silence. Then I sold the house while they were away. And when they came home, they finally understood what happens when the person they dismissed as not real family turns out to be the only one holding the truth.